Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in human relationships when the heart seems to speak one language while behavior speaks another. A man may care deeply about someone, think about her often, feel emotionally connected to her, and yet still hesitate to move closer. He may become distant when he actually wants connection. He may remain silent when there are thousands of words inside him. And this creates one of the most confusing experiences in love. How can someone love you and still make the relationship feel complicated? The answer begins with understanding that love is not a single emotion. Love can exist alongside fear. It can exist alongside insecurity. It can exist alongside unresolved experiences from the past. A person may genuinely care for someone while struggling internally with vulnerability, trust, responsibility, or the fear of being emotionally exposed. This is why human behavior cannot always be interpreted simply. When someone repeatedly approaches and withdraws, the important question is not only, does he love me? A deeper question is, what is happening inside him that makes closeness difficult? Sometimes a person carries emotional patterns that were formed long before the current relationship began. Perhaps he learned to protect himself by avoiding difficult conversations. Perhaps he associates emotional closeness with the possibility of rejection. Perhaps he has never learned how to communicate his feelings clearly. None of this automatically proves that his love is genuine, and this distinction is extremely important. We should never romanticize confusion. Someone's complicated emotions do not give them permission to repeatedly hurt, manipulate, disrespect, or emotionally control another person. Real emotional maturity means looking at both feelings and behavior. A man can have strong feelings for you and still be incapable of maintaining a healthy relationship. Love alone does not automatically create trust, communication, consistency, or emotional safety. This is where self-awareness becomes essential. When we become deeply attached to another person, we can sometimes begin filling the gaps in their behavior with our own interpretations. A delayed message becomes evidence of hidden feelings. Distance becomes proof of fear. Silence becomes proof of deep love. But we must be careful. We cannot know another person's inner world simply by guessing. The healthiest approach is to observe patterns, communicate honestly, and allow the other person to take responsibility for explaining their own feelings. If he truly loves you, he must eventually confront his own contradictions. He must ask himself, what am I afraid of? Why do I move toward this person and then pull away? Am I protecting myself? Or am I protecting an old wound? Am I ready to build something healthy, or do I simply want the comfort of being loved? These questions transform love from a fantasy into an opportunity for psychological growth. Because mature love is not merely about finding someone who makes us feel intensely. It is about becoming capable of relating to another person honestly. And sometimes the most complicated person in a relationship is not the person standing across from us. It is the part of ourselves that we have never fully understood. That is why relationships can become mirrors. They reveal our fears, our expectations, our insecurities, and our emotional habits. The person we love may bring these hidden parts of us into awareness, but awareness creates a choice. We can remain trapped inside old patterns, or we can become conscious of them and change. So if you find yourself thinking, this man deeply loves me, but something is complicated, do not immediately turn that sentence into a romantic conclusion. Pause, observe, communicate, and most importantly, protect your own emotional well-being. Ask not only whether he has feelings for you, ask whether his actions demonstrate respect. Ask whether he communicates honestly. Ask whether he takes responsibility for his behavior. Ask whether the relationship allows both people to grow. Because the deepest form of love is not simply emotional intensity, it is consciousness. It is the ability to recognize what is happening within yourself, to understand another person without losing yourself, and to choose honesty over illusion. Perhaps this is the real complication behind love. And understanding that difference can save us from confusing emotional intensity with emotional maturity. Love may open the door, but self-awareness, honesty, responsibility, and mutual respect are what allow two people to walk through it together. Ladies and gentlemen, love is often imagined as a simple emotion. You love someone, you want to be with them, and everything should naturally fall into place. But human emotions are rarely that simple. A person can experience deep affection for someone while simultaneously carrying fear, uncertainty, insecurity, or unresolved emotional conflict. This is why love and inner conflict can exist at the same time. Imagine a man who genuinely cares about someone. He thinks about her, values her presence, feels emotionally connected to her, and may even imagine a future with her. Yet when the relationship becomes emotionally serious, something inside him begins to resist. He may become quiet, distant, or uncertain. From the outside, this behavior can appear contradictory. The natural reaction may be, if he really loves me, why is he acting this way? The answer may lie in the difference between what a person feels and what a person is psychologically prepared to handle. Emotional closeness requires vulnerability. When we become vulnerable, we allow another person to see parts of ourselves that we normally keep protected. For some people, this can create fear. They may fear rejection, disappointment, abandonment, failure, or losing their independence. The stronger their feelings become, the more exposed they may feel. This creates an internal struggle. One part of the person says, I want to be close to this person. Another part says, I am afraid of what might happen if I become too close. The result can be an approach and withdraw pattern. He moves closer when he feels safe, then pulls away when the emotional intensity becomes overwhelming. He may want connection, but simultaneously fear what connection demands from him. Past experiences can make this conflict stronger. A person's emotional responses are often influenced by lessons they learned earlier in life. Someone who experienced betrayal may struggle to trust. Someone who experienced repeated rejection may become afraid of emotional exposure. Someone who learned that showing emotions makes them vulnerable may hide their feelings even when those feelings are strong. Understanding this does not mean excusing unhealthy behavior. Psychological awareness should never become an excuse for disrespect, manipulation, dishonesty, or repeated emotional harm. Instead, it helps us understand an important principle. Having feelings for someone and knowing how to maintain a healthy relationship are two different abilities. A person may genuinely love another person and still lack the emotional maturity necessary to express that love consistently. He may need to understand himself before he can communicate clearly with someone else. This is why inner conflict deserves attention. The real question is not simply whether love exists. The deeper question is whether the person is willing to understand his fears, communicate honestly, and take responsibility for his actions. Healthy love requires more than emotion. It requires awareness. When a person becomes conscious of the conflict within himself, he gains the possibility of changing his behavior. Instead of allowing fear to control the relationship, he can learn to communicate. Instead of disappearing when emotions become intense, he can explain what he is experiencing. Instead of expecting another person to understand his silence, he can find the courage to speak. That is where love becomes psychologically meaningful. The goal is not to eliminate fear completely. The goal is to understand fear well enough that it no longer controls our choices. Because sometimes the greatest obstacle between two people is not a lack of love. It is the unresolved conflict within one person's own mind. And when that conflict becomes conscious, understood, and responsibly addressed, love has a greater chance of becoming something stable, honest, and healthy, rather than something defined by confusion. Sometimes the most difficult part of understanding love is recognizing that what we see on the surface may not represent everything happening beneath it. Human beings rarely reveal every thought, fear, and emotion they experience. A person can appear calm while struggling internally. They can appear distant while thinking deeply about someone. They can remain silent while carrying emotions they do not yet know how to express. This is why the hidden side of love deserves our attention. When someone cares deeply for another person, that emotional connection can bring both warmth and discomfort. Love can make a person feel understood, valued, and connected, but it can also make them feel vulnerable. Suddenly, another person's opinion matters. Their absence becomes noticeable. Their reactions carry emotional weight. Their acceptance becomes important. For someone who is uncomfortable with vulnerability, this can create an internal tension. They may want to move closer, but something inside them tells them to protect themselves. They may want to express affection, but another part of them worries about being rejected or misunderstood. They may want to communicate honestly, but fear that revealing too much will give another person the power to hurt them. From the outside, this can look like indifference, but distance does not always mean a lack of feeling. At the same time, we must be careful not to assume that every form of distance secretly represents love. That would turn psychology into guesswork. A person's behavior must be understood through patterns, communication, and context, rather than through romantic assumptions. The important lesson is that human behavior often has layers. Someone may withdraw because they are afraid. Someone else may withdraw because they have lost interest. Another person may simply need space. The behavior may look identical from the outside, but the psychological reasons can be completely different. This is why communication is so important. Instead of trying to decode every silence, pause, or change in behavior, emotionally mature relationships create opportunities for honest conversation. People need the freedom to say what they feel and what they fear without being forced to provide an answer that the other person wants to hear. Hidden emotions also become important because people sometimes hide feelings, even from themselves. A person may convince themselves that they do not care because caring makes them uncomfortable. They may avoid thinking about someone because those thoughts create emotional conflict. They may focus on logic because emotions feel too difficult to manage. But avoiding an emotion does not necessarily resolve it. When feelings are ignored rather than understood, they can influence behavior indirectly. A person may become unusually defensive, distant, inconsistent, or uncertain without fully understanding why.